It is Stripes and Whistles with Kansas referees here on the show, an opportunity to talk to referees and officials about certain calls that they have to make in a variety of sports and also just the rule book a little bit. And our guest today for the segment is going to be Scott Goodheart. He's the director of officials for KSHSAA. Scott, appreciate you coming back on the show. Man, how's the officiating world?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always great to come on and talk Kansas sports with you. So, it's January. We're off and running. The slogan has always been about this time of year. This is where the sweat starts to stink, if you will, because we're getting into midseason time. So, you got teams that are excelling and doing well. You got teams that are struggling. You got teams that are trying to get over the hump. So, it's a big 2 weeks or 3 weeks of basketball here in the state of Kansas for sure. So.
I brought you on. I want to talk, the block charge call for basketball and just kind of breaking that down and what the referee's perspective of things. But first of all, you guys came out and KSHSAA announced their 2025 Sports Officials of the Year. Pretty cool honor for a lot of guys and gals across the state.
Yeah, for sure. So this is an annual thing that we work with NFHS where we turn names in to kind of give those officials the little extra kudos. Their work throughout the off season, during the season, things of that nature that they really go above and beyond. So we were able to honor 12 of our very own officials, from gymnastics to football to wrestling to all the sports that we sanction within this office. So appreciate informing us of that, but a big shout out to our officials too for going above and beyond for the youth of the state of Kansas. So.
All right, basketball officiating. Okay, so like one of the calls I feel like in basketball that's I don't know if I'm not going to say there's controversy. There's just, I feel like sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes, people maybe don't quite understand it. Is the block charge call. And the concept is there, but whether or not, it goes one way or it goes the other way, I think, is from an interesting perspective from the officials. So first of all, like, just how challenging is it as a basketball official to, call block charges in some instances?
Yeah, so I think you hit it right on the head. It is a 50-50 call, and more times than not, like, it is the hardest call in basketball because, like we said, it's 50-50. But I think what's really hard for people to understand a lot of times in basketball, it's offensive oriented or offensive minded. So people are watching the ball, they're watching this, they're watching that. They're not really watching the defenders. So sometimes when we have officials, when they're first starting, the hardest tendency to break is not watching the ball, because the ball goes up, the shot goes up, there they go. Well, then they look back down and they see that the offensive, players on the floor, and they don't know how they got there because they're watching the ball. So that's one thing I really try to preach to our young, newer officials when I talk to those classes or clinics or things like, hey, we have to be really good about refereeing the defense. So if you referee the defense, it makes officiating the block charge call pretty easy, actually. So a lot of times, too, people understand like what legal guarding position is. Legal guarding position is almost like 2 feet planted. They think they have to take in the chest sometimes, which rule of thumb usually is probably good for a block charge. But really, as long as they are in legal guarding position, forward facing, they can almost be sliding to an extent. They can also even be retreating to an extent too. And sometimes that's a misinterpreted rule, but when you have players that are going pretty fast, it's a difficult thing to call. There's no question about it. And that's why there's so much time and so much things that go over with the block charge call.
So you bring up kind of like that's like the retreating part. So if you're going with the offensive player, whether that's sliding right or left or retreating, I mean, you're still potentially in position to draw a charge.
Yeah, so legal guarding position obviously is the big one, So it's sometimes you see like these where they have the 2 hands down. That's more of a college thing, but verticality is huge. If you can use the terminology of verticality, like, hey, you have the floor all the way to the ceiling as high as you will get. And sometimes that'll take me into another one when you talk about the over the back. Well, that's not a rule in basketball. Like, there's a pushing foul, but over the back is not a foul, right? We have athletes that are probably taller that can tip it out and do that versus, no, I completely went through you to get the rebound. Then that's a foul. So,
right.
Again, not to get on a tangent, just one of those
no, that's good
rules. And the other one I'll tell you, the other one that's misinterpreted a lot is calling a reach, right? And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck here, but there's no rule for a reach in the handbook, like in the rule book. So I don't know how else you make a steal without you swiping and reaching, essentially. So there's illegal contact, and there's going to be contact in basketball. That's what people have to understand too. Like, there's contact in basketball, and there's legal guarding position, there's legal contact. But then I think it's that one of when you're not allowing, progress to happen, and you're proceeding that progress, and you're doing things like that, then that's where you have those fouls sometimes. So.
I mean, you don't get tired of like people yelling down from the stands, like "That's over the back, ref," like something like that. So that just makes you probably smile a little bit when you hear those.
Yeah, that's some of those ones that you kind of just nod and do whatever. But yeah, again, not to get on a tangent or anything like that, but it's one of those things we try to help educate when we can on things. So.
Well, I gotta imagine like especially any active sport that that moves a lot, like basketball, like your positioning as an official has got to be key. So like being in that right spot to make sure you have the good view. Like how important is that for you?
So angles is everything that you could imagine, right? Because that's what we tell officials is like put yourself in the best angle possible so you can make the call or no call. Like because sometimes people think, well, they didn't call anything. Well, that's right. Not everything has to have a call on it. So put yourself in a position to where you can make a call or no call. And we trust your judgment. Like the biggest thing I tell people all the time is talking about definitions. And that's rule 4 in the NFHS basketball rule book. Like once you understand definitions, like airborne shooter, different things like even blocking and charging, basket interference, then the rule book makes more sense once you understand definitions and moving forward. So, case in point, we're in section 4-6, section 7, blocking and charging, art 1. Blocking is illegal personal contact which impedes the progress of an opponent with or without the ball. So you can imagine, yes, there's going to be contact, but once I'm impeding your progress and not allowing you to gain, certain things by holding you or hitting you with my hip or something like that, then we've got a blocking foul. And then talking about art 2, it goes right into charging about an illegal personal contact caused by pushing or moving into an opponent's torso. So again, torso is anywhere that's in this region, right? But a lot of times the old school thing is, well, they got to take in the chest. That's not necessarily true either. But understand too, the name of the game anymore, it is so fast. I haven't seen a lot of block charge calls essentially because the game is just really changed a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. So there are a couple other things here that mention on that. Sorry, but again, like blocking has art 1 and it is one sentence, right? So then after that, section 7, art 2 of charging has charging is illegal personal contact caused by pushing or moving your opponent's torso. But then there's also an A, a B, a C, and a D category on that. So again, that's your kind of difference of that. So it makes it unique to where it's difficult, right? Because then the rule book can be kind of confusing to read sometimes too, which I don't think people understand that either. So
one area I know that sometimes would frustrate me is like when the offensive player kind of initiates that contact, and I always call it like either kind of like buffaloing or kind of bowling their way in. Like how tough is that from an official standpoint when maybe they're trying to, I don't want to say they're baiting them, but like initiating that contact?
So I think a lot of times when officials can talk to coaches, they're saying, well, why isn't that a foul on that guy? Well, coach, your guy initiated all the contact. Therefore, it was marginal enough maybe not to call. However, it wasn't that much of an advantage gain to where we had to call it essentially. So, I mean, you guys, there is such an art to officiating that even the guys who've done this for 30, 40 years, that it's still difficult. And even the pros and even the Division, 1 officials, there is such an art to this sometimes to where you have to understand that, more times than not, if you can get a call on that end of the court, then you call it, and then you have something similar on that end of the court, that's probably going to go a long way. So you can say, well, the officials were consistent and they matched like calls. That doesn't always happen from time to time, but the goal is obviously to be perfect from the start of the game to the end of the game, but it's just not always a reality either. So,
hey, Scott, I appreciate the time, and I'll let you get back at it.
All right. Thanks, Cole. Appreciate it.
That is Scott Goodheart, the KSHSAA Director of Officials, and that'll do it for Stripes and Whistles.